Of that 153, we have 19 life members. We have 9 families. We have 15 new since July of 24, and because we work on a fiscal year. And that's the membership report. Here are a few membership applications. We'd love to have you join us. I'll put them right here. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Nicole?
Yes. Everyone, welcome. Just a couple of quick announcements from the History Center before we get started. My name is Nicole Smith. I'm an employee here. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the York County History Center YouTube channel. Tonight, we actually have a program in our lobby. If you're interested in sticking around, we're having a commemoration of Lafayette's visit to York in 1825. I believe that starts around 5 o'clock. On February 7th and 8th, the Friends of the History Center are having their treasures and trinkets sale, vintage and fine jewelry and accessories fundraiser, new fundraiser. On February 11th, we have our Agricultural York program. This one is going to be on urban winemaking, and we'll have Mark and Val Rhodes here. And on February 19th, we have a regular Civil War roundtable. The speaker is Robert Colby. His talk is An Unholy Traffic, Slave Trading in the Civil War South. So there you have our current programs. For more information on all our programming, please visit yorkhistorycenter.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Just a couple quick things. Those of you who've got the newsletter saw or save the date for our 50th anniversary celebration that will occur in September. The board's going to try to firm up some more plans for that after this meeting. So keep watching our newsletter for plans for that. At this point, as far as we know, we're going to have the celebration in here with probably a full dinner and some other activities. Also, Nicole did not mention this, but starting on March the 1st, the Friends of the York County History Center will be collecting books for its annual book blast. So if you're like me and have too many books at home and you want to get rid of them, this would be a good opportunity to do that and also to support this organization. The book blast will be held the first weekend in June. I think it's the first weekend in June, if I remember correctly. Is there any other news anybody has today to share with the group? Okay, if not, I'm going to ask our Vice President, Richard Kunkel, to come and tell us about future programs and introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm Richard Kunkel. I'm the Vice President of the South Central Pennsylvania Genealogical Society. First, I'll tell you about our future programs for the rest of this year for the Society up through June. So 4 weeks from now, on March the 2nd, in this room, yours truly will be the speaker on the history and genealogy of New Sweden. Probably most of you don't know that the first European settlers in what is now Pennsylvania and Delaware and parts of New Jersey were from Sweden. Kind of a lost chapter of early American history. So I'll be talking about that, and there's actually even some influence of those folks that came over here into York County as well. That started about 1638 was when they first established New Sweden. So very early where Philadelphia is and Wilmington. Then we have a very interesting program for Sunday, April the 6th. And that will be Tyler Stump from the Pennsylvania State Archives. And he's going to speak about Farview State Hospital, which was Pennsylvania's institution for the criminally insane. The Pennsylvania State Archives holds records for all the state hospitals, including the Harrisburg State Hospital. And this one, which if someone was considered criminally insane, they were sent there. And there were actually people from York County who ended up there as well. He's going to have some specific information about some of those folks that spent time actually have some relatives who were at the Harrisburg State Hospital, and years ago, Jonathan helped me get records. The great-great-grandmother, and she was there for quite a while. But very detailed records. If you have anyone who spent time in the state hospital, you can find some rather interesting materials. We will be off-site on Sunday, May the 4th. That will be a visit to the Adams County Historical Society. Anyone is welcome to come. And we will be visiting their library and genealogy, but there's also a museum which is dedicated to the experience in Gettysburg during the battle. So if you were a resident of Adams County living there during that 3-day battle, it's supposed to be a very good museum. But we're also going to find out about their library and archives. Dr. Charles Gladfelder was the head of the Adams County Historical Society for years and years, and left quite a mark on that institution and then the records that they have. They have quite a few records. If you have Adams County ancestors of any sort, it's a great place to do research. And then our final program for the season will be on, I believe it's Sunday, June the 8th. Not the first Sunday, but the second Sunday. And that will be Jamie Norpole with a presentation about the Welsh and Delta. So I'm looking forward to that. So usually for February, we try to have something in honor of Black History Month. And this year we're very lucky to have Neicy DeShields Moulton. And she has a presentation, which we're going to hear today, called Veiled Chapters of the Hampton Plantation. And she's going to tell us all about Hampton Plantation. How many of you have been there? Excellent. If you haven't been there, it's well worth the trip. It's only less than an hour down the road. It's just north of Towson, right on the Beltway. And she'll tell us all about it, I'm sure. It's part of the National Park Service. So Neicy is a retired computer hardware engineer, and she's almost 30 years of experience doing genealogy. And she's done quite a bit of genealogy. She's from York. She's been a member of the African American Historical Society of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And she also has served as a member of the board of this organization, not the South Central, but the York County History Center, where we are right now. And she's very passionate about genealogy and family history. And she's been giving presentations for a number of years. It's been a while since she gave a presentation to South Central, but we've had her as a presenter before, and I think you're going to greatly enjoy her. So please help me in welcoming Neicy DeShields.
Oh. Hello. I want to start by telling you exactly why I call it veiled chapter. And the reason for that is our history has been hidden for a very, very long time. And it's finally those doors and those cracks are finally opening, where we get to hear our stories and tell our stories finally. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And go ahead. This is the mansion. This mansion is, so you can see it. Nothing's working. Oh, you can see it. Of course it's not working. No, it's not working all the time. Okay. Well, the mansion is a 24,000 square foot building, and they had over 25,000 acres. It was initially bought back in the early 1700s, and Charles Ridley actually purchased the property. There were 7 generations of Ridley, so the legacy of wealth got to carry on for 7 generations as an example. The first one was Colonel Charles Ridley. He was the one that actually purchased the land, and he had enslaved people at the time also. And those he had them to actually, do the land, do the agriculture and all of that. The second one was Captain Charles Ridley, and he was the son of the first Ridley. And then the third one, because the second Ridley did not have any children, he left it to his nephew. His nephew's last name was Carnan. So he's called Charles Carnan Ridley to carry the name on it. So they wanted the legacy to continue under his name. And then we had the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh, and they were all either John or Charles. Okay. If you take a look at this map, since it has 25,000 acres, it kind of gives you an idea. There's a map over here that shows you around Baltimore and then around Baltimore City. So what I want to do is I'm going to overlap them so you can have an idea of how mapped this property was. Wow, oh, there it is. Oh, there we go. We're right in here. All the way up to 95, about 5 miles from Pennsylvania line. You can see that. And this is what the property looks like at the height of enslavement. You have a house up here. And then all the way down here is the overseer's house where the enslaved were in the slave quarters right here. And to give you a good idea. Because right now there's no trees and there's actually a road that goes in between. So you have, when I took a bus trip down there with some people, we had to get back on the bus, go all the way on the other side to get to the enslavement quarters. Charles Carnett Ridgely, he was the 15th governor of Maryland, and he was one of the wealthiest in the United States. He had his slave labor provided a backbone for the workforce of Hampton. He had over 800 enslaved people. Can you imagine that, having 800 enslaved people? And there were also indentured people on the land as well. They were from Ireland or they were British. Hampton Plantation, the last 43 acres was designated to the national parks. They currently have 62 because they bought some land back. They ended up selling most of it. As a matter of fact, White Marsh, Galbraith College, Towson University, all of that is on the land of the Ridgely family. And it's called Hampton Plantation because it used to be called the North Hampton, because most people get it mixed up with the one in Virginia, but it's here in Towson, Maryland. Enslavement at Hampton, the Ridgely family held interest in all ironworks. That's what they were known for. And mills. Their complex center, the Hampton Mansion, it was just huge, and all their families were involved. And we won't go into too much detail of the families that are involved, but you'll recognize the names like Howard County, Perry County, White Marsh. All of those names were relatives or his daughters may have married into. And after you go down to Maryland, that's basically what you see. The family business was furnaces and ironworks, grains and mills, agriculture, orchards, livestock, and dairy products. And just to note, children started working at the age of 5 and 6 on the plantation. But these are all the other things that they did. Blacksmiths, gardeners, jockeys, because they had a huge horse farm as well. And this is the inside of the house. Look at the wealth. And it's period time. It's back at the time when it's decorated for the time in the beginning. And a lot of the furniture is original. If you take a look at the kitchen here, then you have the living room, the dining room. Look at that. And when I was there one year, they had reenactors actually reenacting the enslaved people at the time. So I was able to take pictures of people actually being in the house and playing characters of enslaved people that were actually on the plantation at the time. And this is the outside of the house. And they were one of the most unusual ones that actually had an ice house, and they made ice cream back then. And the ice house is right here. And then you had the gardeners, and you had this was the servants' quarters. They did not have the servants making food inside the house just in case it burnt down or something were to happen. So they would do things there and then come and bring the stuff inside. And this is actually a woman standing in front of her enslaved quarters. And this is just pictures, these are actual pictures that came from Hampton. And these are people that actually live there. If you have the names here, which is, I think, it's kind of blurry over here. Just look at that, and these are kids that were on the plantation. This is a lady right here, where she's actually walking the kids as an example. Sorry about that, I hit it too many times. And this is just a depiction right here of the overseers. And most people ask, how can so many people be enslaved and have one person actually watching over them? There's a lot of reasons for that. And I do have a small video where Dr. Cheryl LaRoche will actually talk about it. The video is a little shaky because I was taking it at the last minute, but you can just listen to the words of what she's saying. And the overseers, we know what they were. They had a house down on the other side, and they overseen all the enslaved. Bondage was bondage. In other words, slavery by no other name is still slavery. That's an example. And then we had two worlds. One was the Ridgely world, which everybody's all dressed up and fancy on the porch. And the second was the enslaved people, and where they lived. This is the lower quarters, the lower house. And the lower house here, you have this is the overseer's house right here. This is the enslaved quarters. And this is just the front porch of it. And these are the last ones that are still standing. They're made of stone, so that's why they're still standing. They had many, of course, made of wood that were there that no longer exist. And currently, Hampton's going through a renovation period right now. So if you go down there now, some things will be cut off. You can't get to, they got a grant last year to fix a lot of things up. The enslaved quarters had some water damage that's going to be fixed. And the main property is going to be fixed, and they'll be doing some ground penetrating for the cemetery and a lot of other things. And here's the video. I want you to listen to what Cheryl has to say. She is the one that actually did the ethnographic study for the Hampton Plantation.
So even by today's standards, even though this is the overseer's house, it's not a bad job to have. And you're looking at it from the material standpoint of what you see here. But I'm a landscape person. I'm studying the landscape and the land, because what I know, the historical record isn't gonna have what I need, but I know the land will help you. So again, look at the view that you have from here.
Yeah, wow.
So I you understand how the buses go all the way. This is the view. I've been up in the two I take pictures, you can see across the county. Now the trees have come up, but you can see just great distances from the cooler of that house. So now I want you to understand that this is what I call the landscape of slavery. Whenever you go someplace, dominance is in the landscape, and it's dictated by what's on the hill and what's not on the hill, and what you can and cannot see. So the overseer would have been here. We have the horses. There would have been barns that have been destroyed because they put a housing development in over here. Somewhere down here would have been a racetrack. We don't know where. Possibly right in this area here. So we know that horse racing, gambling, they don't want to talk about that, but Pimlico, we'll talk about it some more because we're going to see some coaches that day. So this is the space where I need you to begin to think about how is it that so few people can enslave so many? So 1 is oversight, 2 is money, 3 is violence, always violence. They are iron workers. We know that we have receipts for them making collars. If you've seen those iron collars that people are locked on.
They have one in there.
There's all kinds of coercion that I see. Not so much here, because what they do at Hampton's a little different from what I see in other places. Hampton, as we know, encourages in a marriage, the people who are enslaved up there, they're marrying each other. And they have huge families. So these families are having what? Children. We have people who are having 8, 10, 12, 15, 20, 22 children. Now, in slavery, the condition of the child follows the condition of the mother. You heard that, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean? For the white slaveholder, it is a very toxic mix because now he's got slavery, sex, and profit, and no accountability for paternity. So now when you see people who are of mixed race, it's lots of times a white slaveholding father and a black mother, and the child by law is enslaved because the mother was enslaved. Yes?
Yes.
So that when we're looking at these things, we need to understand how these situations came to be. Make sense? So when we start to talk about, after we go through this part, we're gonna go over because they have 3 standing stone slave quarters here. And that is a tribute to the material that's been used. A lot of places I go, you can think of slavery like a crime scene, and you can think of historians as having wiped the evidence clean. So they get rid of the slave quarters on most of these places, they're gone. And when you find them standing, it's a real interpretive treasure because oftentimes they don't exist anymore.
And they're made of wood, right?
They're also made of wood. It's, termites and all these
Yeah.
other things that come, we have to preserve and they burn because lots of arson in the Black history, even though they don't talk about it as arson.
What do you think about that? And I thought that she could tell it better than I, but she actually did the study and we connected because of her doing the study. And she became a friend and she does a lot. She goes around the country actually doing studies with universities, telling the stories of the enslaved. And Cheryl just told you exactly what, how it is when you're enslaved and when you leave or when you don't leave or when you're manumitted, what it is. So 350 enslaved people were manumitted, and that was the largest manumission in history that Charles Ridgely did. Children under the age of 2, like she said, they follow the mothers. Females between the age of 25 and 45 were released, as were males at the age of 28 and 45, and that was, of course, later in life. This did not end slavery at Hampton. The new owner, which is John Ridgely, he purchased 62 more enslaved people because his father actually manumitted a lot of slaves. The remaining enslaved in their increase were freed when they reached the age of 25. Enslaved at Hampton. Slave force labor provided the backbone of the workforce at Hampton. Work and discipline were regulated by one or more overseers. The Ridgely family enslaved people dating back to 1747. They cleaned the land, they did the agricultural production, and they did the ironworks. The enslaved were sought after in particular sections of Africa because of their known skills, like agriculture, ironworks, architecture, and artisan. We have this misconception that Africans had no skills. That is very untrue. People didn't go to Africa for no reason whatsoever. And when they went to get people, they went to certain parts of Africa because they were skilled at certain things. The idea that Africa was undeveloped before colonization is a common misconception. Here's Africa. And look at all the stuff that Africa has. And if you take a look here, you look over here and look who actually colonized Africa. You have the French, and it was because of petroleum. You have, I can't see who that is over there from that side, but anyway, if you look over here and you compare it to here, you know who was colonizing that particular part of Africa. And then when Cheryl came in and did the ethnographic studies, they focused on 6 families. And the families first were the Batty family, Batty, Beatty, Baby, Bodie. They had all these different names once they not enslaved anymore. The Cummings family, the Harris family, the Spencer family, the Brown family, and the Dorsey family. And those were the first 6 they started working with. Names and descriptions, if they didn't have a last name, they would call them as for their physical attributes. It would be Yellow Sam, Black Joe, Cripple John, Lane Ann. Age descriptions were young, old, and big and little. The racial descriptions were little child, dark child, yellow, or mulatto. And occupational indicators were a lame person, that's what they would call him, they wouldn't give him a name. And then it would be strong or sickly, and most of them didn't have last names. And inside the enslaved quarters, they had the enslaved quarters, they also had the indentured. If you take a look at this is the enslaved quarters on the inside, right here. Okay, and this is a pillow on a cot on the floor, and this is what they kind of look like. And if you look right here, this is the indenture. They actually had a bed. You see the difference between the two, just even when indenture were there as well. They had a bed and they had a cot on the floor. This is the neck break that they were telling you about earlier. And Hampton had good records right here of the enslaved. As you can see, it's a whole list. And it was when they had to supply food and clothing. So they have a whole list of the enslaved right here are the Batty family. And to see better what that looks like, this is what it would look like on a person. And the one you're actually seeing there is actually for a child. They put the collars on the child as well. It's real small. When you go in there, it's actually sitting inside the enslaved quarters. That's actually in the overseer's house. And you can actually pick it up and touch it and hold it. And it's made for a child. So if the child was being disciplined and he tried to run away, that was put on his neck. Advertisements of runaways. The first one here is Bet, and she has a York connection, as you can see here. Okay. Right here it says she may have gone to York, and she may have gone to Lancaster, and she may have gone to Columbia, and she was down by the Broad Tavern, and they were offering $150 for her return. This one here is Penny. And Penny, they were looking for her. She was a mulatto. And they said she had ran away from the plantation as well. And as you can see, the person's name on the bottom was Charles Ridgely. And you had another enslaved person. These are all the articles that were in the newspapers when they were looking for the enslaved, that I'll call them freedom seekers. When they were looking for the freedom seekers. And I saw a common theme when I was looking at this as well. The majority of the people that were actually enslaved on their plantations were listed as mulatto. So what does that tell you? That most of them were mixed race. I kept looking at the documents, and I think there were more almost mulattoes than there were listed as being Black on that plantation. And more than 80 freedom seekers gained their freedom. And as you can see here, it was actually people here that are of African American descent. Pay attention to some of the last names that you see here, because more than likely, one of your ancestors may have come from this plantation. You may not know it. So kind of just pay attention, because a lot of them came to New York, went to Baltimore, and they moved up a little bit there. So you have Lucy Jackson. She was a housekeeper. She actually, I think it was either her or his sister. She actually ran away and they never were able to find her. And then they had another list inside the plantation, which I thought was quite interesting. It was a Christmas list. They had all the kids' names on the Christmas list. And then you had some that were missing. And what we were told was that some were missing because it was a form of punishment. They didn't get a Christmas gift. Or because of their behavior, and if they had ran away, of course, they didn't get a Christmas gift, and they rented them out all the time. So the kids were rented out at the age of 5 and 6. So they would rent them out so the kids weren't available to be there to get their Christmas gifts. And that happened all throughout the South and also in this area as well. And this is another list. It's an inventory of all singular goods, personal estate of Charles Ridgely. This is his list and his will, where he was talking about what he had and who they were. And we were considered chattel, where the indentured were not. Chattel means that we're there for life. Indentured means once your debt is paid off, you're allowed to go and pursue your life. And if you look at some of these names on here, you can see right here. Take a look at the names here. If you recognize any, there's Anderson, Richardson, talking about last name, Batty, Ashburn, Cowdy, Toogood, Harris. Then you have more Andersons, and you have Williams here. And these are just the people that were at the ironworks. Certain people lived down near the ironworks, and others were actually on the plantation. And the ironworks wasn't really close to this to their home. And this is another list where they're showing just the name or no name at all. So they had several lists. Just first name. And as you can see, when you go down there, they have markers, and all of these are on the markers. And I pointed out specific ones, as you saw Batty, Sal Batty, Maria Batty, Louisa Batty, Bill Spencer, and most of those folks came from this plantation. George Batty, he was born around 1775. George and Esther was his wife, first appeared on the census as human property at the Northampton in 1829. The work of the family contributed to the enormous wealth enjoyed by generations of the Ridgely family. George, at the age of 54, was too old to qualify for manumission. And manumission means that you were released from slavery. Instead, he was willed to a widower, so he was given to one of Charles Ridgely's daughters for almost the rest of his life. Most of the Batty family were bequeathed to James Howard County, as an example. They were all married into this family, all the wealthy. And George continued living in slavery with his younger children. Remember, some of the younger children could not go. So the wife was actually manumitted. She would go away, and he was still left there without a wife, and some of his kids were gone, and all he had was his grandchildren because of the age stipulation. So all these families were split up. So what do you do when you split up? And you have no idea where you are or where you're going. Think about that. You're on all this land, and you have no, because you've never been able to step foot outside of that land. Esther was manumitted at the age of 41 with her 1-year-old granddaughter, but the child's mother had to stay because of the age limit. Ephraim, the eldest son, reunited after his emancipation 10 years later, but he didn't see his father to 10 years later. I just can't imagine not seeing my mother and father, my brothers and sisters for that long. George Batty, Beatty, I can go on and on. Okay, he worked at the furnace. So that was one of the worst jobs you could have. The furnace was hot. You could be killed. If you felt some of that hot iron on you, who's to say what, how it would have been? Just imagine being that hot, especially in summertime or anytime at that furnace. But that was his job. And certain people lived there, and they allowed them to have families. They allowed them to have husbands and wives and children. They all lived down by the furnace. And when I was doing the research, I found out that that furnace was only 5.5 miles away from the Pennsylvania border. And of course, you had people that actually ran away. This is what a manumission looks like. When Charles Ridgely passed away, he manumitted. He magnified this first, sorry. Magnified it, so you can see. But this is George Batty, right here. And this is his wife, Hester, but they call her name was Hetty, but they call her Hester Batty. These are actual manumission papers of these people. And then this is Rebecca Spencer. Nancy Brown Davis, she was she was the child of Polly Batty and Ambrose Brown. The rest of her life was spent at the Hampton Plantation. She never left, even when everybody else was manumitted or left. Because she was there since she was a child. She knew no other way. So she just stayed with the family. And she was not only the only African American interred there. Not one African American interred in their cemetery there. And I spoke to them about where are the other African Americans that had passed away. They said they did not know. I can't believe that. But they say they did not know where the African Americans that had passed away are buried. So hopefully with this new fund they have and this ground penetrating radar, they can find where they are. The Richmond kept very good records. So it doesn't make sense to me that they don't know where they're buried. Their records are too good. They have a lot of records. Over 500 boxes of paperwork. And this is she. And she took care of the children. And I'll tell you a little bit about her when we get a little further. Manumitted surnames, but he started manumitting people. These are the names that he manumitted. The Batty family, he manumitted 10 of them. The Cummings family, 15. Johnson family, 18. Johnson, your family might be there. The Wick family, just to give you an idea. And they were manumitted when he was actually manumitting people. They were the first. Of course, slavery, by no other name, was also in York County as well. We can see here. And this document here shows you that York County had slavery. All of them except for, there we go. Except for Dover. Every county in York County had enslaved people except for Dover. Okay. And if you get down here and read this here, it talks about how many enslaved people there were. There's been in like 1790, there were like 400 and something, 471 enslaved people. So we did have slavery in York County. We were not exempt from having slaves as well. Who was George Batty? George Batty was my great-great-great-grandfather. I had a chance to touch some of the iron, but they told me that the pig iron that they made, more than likely he made it because he was the main person at that at the forge. And I got the opportunity to actually touch it and hold it and feel it. Yeah, and that's what they made to make all the steel. All that right there. And what's it feel like to touch something your grandfather made that's 4 generations from you? I can't even speak it in words, to be honest. Something that he actually touched. They relocated to Pennsylvania. And after gaining their freedom, they did. And they married each other. They moved down to Peach Bottom and Calls Ferry, Boeing Road, Delta. They were all down in those areas. And that's where my family was from, Muddy Creek. Can't leave that one out. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about. John Batty, he married Nancy Spencer. The family ultimately settled in Peach Bottom. And then this region was notable to the Underground Railroad as well, because it was right next to the canal. And my 3rd great grandfather, Lewis Washington Dorsey, he was a conductor on the Underground Railroad. And I found documents stating that. I know we can talk about slavery, but we're going to talk about some Black excellence right now. What happened to people after slavery? Lewis Dorsey, who I just mentioned, he was in the Civil War in the 25th Regiment, and they had it wrong on here in the documents. I found that another piece of paper stating he was in the 25th Regiment. He was involved with the Underground Railroad. He was in 2 battles during the Civil War. And he was also a Mason. And that's my 3rd great grandfather. And just think about it. 3rd great grandfather. Look at who your 3rd great grandfather was. And this is where I found him on the 25th Regiment. And this was on, they all went to Camp William Penn for training. And this is another enslaved, he had enslaved ancestors on the plantation. His name was, Harry Cummings. And because, let me give you a little bit about him. He became the first African-American to graduate from the University of Maryland from law school. At 24 years old, he was elected to Baltimore County, Council. And Cummings delivered a seconding speech for President Roosevelt in 1904. And his ancestors were enslaved maybe 1 or 2 generations back. And then we have Charles Toogood. Toogoods were on the plantation, and he was a Tuskegee Airman. So when they talk about Black history and the Tuskegee Airmen, some of those men came from that plantation as well. They're descendants. And this is another one. He played professional football. Hall of Fame. He was a captain. He played professional football. His late brother Philip also played professional sports for the Browns Bombers in New York City. He was inducted in the Hall of Fame in 1972. And then you have Keith Beatty, and he's a local New York Countyan. And Keith has a street named after him now. He has a lot of accolades. He was honored as a role model for young people. He was also given an award from Nancy Reagan. And that's in my generation, just to show you some of the positive things that we've done and how we've contributed to society. His son played professional football, and he played for the Eagles, and he played for the Giants. And he has 2 rings in there right there, the Super Bowl rings. You can see those. Patricia Cole, she's another person where her ancestors actually on that plantation. And I have to tell you a little bit about her because when I met her, I was making plans for the African American Historical Society in Lancaster to go to the Hampton Plantation Color School. If anybody hasn't been there, you might want to go there. Langston Hughes actually graduated from that school. And a lot of your civil rights folks did that. And I didn't know I'm related to some of those people too. But it's in Hampton Grade. And she's a retired colonel, but now she's president of the Hampton Grace Colored School. Wonderful person. And when I called to make reservations and set it all up, I'm talking to her and I said, well, I'm planning another trip. I'm going down to the Hampton Plantation. She says, oh, my family's been down around. We have land on that plantation. And I was like, okay. So we get talking further. She goes, well, she said, what's your connection? I said, well, I'm a baddie or a BB. And she goes, what? She said, my mom is. So I was like, are you kidding me? She says, no, my mom still lives there on the land that they purchased with active enslavement. But you might want to know too, is there's a place called Towson Town, right in the midst of the big building down there in Towson. And there's a little section there, it's a historic Black neighborhood there, and they're doing tours with it right now. So you might want to go check that out. And like her and another young lady, they're also bringing back our history and telling her history. And what I found out was that after enslaved remaniement, they purchased land from Ridgely to live there. And they built homes, a whole neighborhood, a thriving neighborhood. And the city has been trying to push them out for ages. You see how Towson's growing. They've been trying to push them out. But they've had it marked as a historic place that you can go down there and actually do a tour. And actually, they're actually doing this too. They're creating a freedom trail from Hampton Plantation down to Towson Town. I think that might be done this year. So that'd be something else that you can go to once you go to Hampton. And this is she. So she's my cousin, my new cousin. And she asked me to come down and do a presentation for the family. I'm like, well, sure. So she gathered 36 people in her family together. All these people are my cousins that I never met before, that I just met for the first time, and I did a presentation for them to let them know how they're connected to the Hampton Plantation. And these are some of the people that were there, and they served us lunch. It was wonderful. And to know that in Baltimore, they have all this family. So surely kids can't date plenty in Baltimore. And a lot of them didn't know the story. So we did we took a photo. And the 2 ladies that I'm sitting next to, one's 97 and one's 95. So they were able to tell us a lot of history just in that day we were talking. And they were shocked to see some of the things that I was telling them. and some of the memories that they had from what their ancestors were telling them. So this is all my new family, right here. Yeah, all these people. And Nancy Goldring, she's the one creating the Freedom Trail in Hampton Town. She lives in Hampton Town. And her grandmother, she actually created a garden. So like her grandmother before her, she is keeping the legacy alive and all that she does in the community. Her list goes on, and she's actually doing a whole lot of things to uplift the Hampton Town, doing the Freedom Trail, and then doing the tours down there. And I went down there to tour for the first time, and it was like 30 kids that were there. So I was impressed to see that many kids actually interested in our history. And there's a little house here that they moved from one place to here. And I'm standing in front of it right there. And it's called the Freedom Cabin. You might want to go down and see that. And you can go inside and everything. And these were some of the students that I was along with when we were actually looking at the Hampton Town. And these are some of my new cousins and new friends. As you can see here, this is Nancy is my new cousin. I just met her. This is my new cousin, Amy. And of course, this is my new cousin, Valerie. There's my good friend, Delma, that went along with me. And my new friend, Deborah. And Deborah is such a sweet person. She works for Goucher's College. She's an archivist there. So she's the one that has all those documents that I can go through. And we've been able to connect. And she said she helped me out as much as I can for any information that I might need. Wonderful, wonderful person. So it's a blessing to meet them. We all went out to lunch that day. Breaking Lives Through Slavery, Engaging Hollow Grounds is another program that the Hampton Plantation has put together. I'm on the committee of that, and I actually did a presentation for them for that particular event. And what they're concentrating on is having the descendants, or hopefully getting the descendants together so that we can all meet each other and then have family reunions if we'd like to. And I was at Goucher's College. They invited me to come down to do a presentation and do a question and answer session at Goucher's College. And this is me with my two new cousins. So we're talking about the Hampton Plantation. And this picture here, here's Cheryl. Where is she at? This is Cheryl right here. She did the study. And the man standing behind me, okay, he's a descendant from Arlington, Virginia. And he's a descendant from the, let me pass that forward first. From Robert E. Lee Plantation. So they've already gotten together with the descendants of Robert E. Lee, and descendants of the plantation are coming together, and they have a family reunion every year. And that's where Hampton's trying to get. If we can get people to get over the stigma of the enslavement in the plantation, we can bring us together and we'll know who each other is and share our story. It's a healing process. At least for me it is. So he's standing right up front. The man that was standing behind me, there he is right there. And he heads that up. And then we hosted a descendants engagement event. And Shirley was there. And Eric was there. And we got to meet some of the descendants of our relatives. And we had communication, and it was great. We had a luncheon. It was really, really great. And I can't thank them enough for even showing up for me, because most of the time I'm by myself working on all this. Most family members don't seem to come along. And to give you an idea, this is my pedigree chart. And it shows you this is George and Hetty. And going back to me, this just gives you an idea. So I was able to create that pedigree. So I've been able to go back to slavery, but I haven't been able to go back to Africa to find out where they came from. Because they had a lot, and I was looking for the runaway slaves. I found a lot of documents on purchasing. So I'm still trying to find out where he was purchased from or what ship he was on, or the family was on. And to let you know how I keep this all together, I keep it organized through legacy software. Legacy software allows me to put both in George and Hetty, their descendants, And then we go down to the next generation, which is John and Nancy. Now, John is my great-great-grandfather, great-great-great-grandfather. And he had a daughter, which is Hetty Cassandra Catherine Batty. She married a Murray. I'm a Murray too. And then she had a son named Thomas Randolph Murray. He married Sarah Stewart from Lancaster County. And then my mom and me. I just give you an idea of the software that I'm using for that. So I said, okay, are there any DNA connections between me and this plantation, the people on the plantation? So I'm like, okay, so I set out to check. And when I start looking at trees that were connected to me, as you can see, Charles Ridley is right in the middle. And this is me. So this is my DNA match. I'm a Ridgely also. And I thought, well, let me just double check that. I did another test. And as you can see here, I am 32% Caucasian. And then I did a second test just to make sure. So I did another one. So then I said, no, let me test somebody else. I tested my sister. And right in here, you have the Ridgeleys all over again. So yeah, she's related to them too. I even tested a cousin. I said, let me, because I know she's from that line. There we go again. There's Carnan, there's Ridgely, there's Dorothy. Okay. And what I did not test was a male. So I needed one male because he was a direct line to the Batty family. So my cousin Muggs allowed me to test him. And I'll be darned right there. Ridgely's. Look at that. So I am a Ridgely. And then this is his DNA makeup. He's 42% Caucasian. You can't judge a book by its cover. And I'll let this explain itself. No comment. Surnames associated with the Hampton Plantation. Take a look at these names and see if these are any of your ancestors. Even white folks, because they had a lot of indentured Irish on this site as well, and British. So check them out. In the family. And with the ethnographic study being done, thanks to Cheryl and her team, if it hadn't been for them actually doing their research, I wouldn't have been able to find my ancestor. I had everything that she needed, and she had everything I needed. When we came together, it was like heaven to know that my grandfather, that she actually found my grandfather. And then my conclusion, let me read it from here, it's a little easier for me to read. I'm going to read my conclusion for you. The connection between my heritage and the wealth of this country is deeply personal and undeniable. America's prosperity in many ways rests on the uncompensated labor and invaluable contributions of African Americans, including my ancestors. This truth is woven into my identity and fuels my determination to ensure their sacrifices are recognized and honored. The resilience, the sacrifices, and the innovations of African Americans are not just a chapter in history. They are a foundation of this country. Their story is not just theirs. It's my story, our story. and a vital part of who we all are in this country. What they endured and accomplished inspires me daily and reminds me that challenges are not excuses, they are opportunities to rise. Thanks to the efforts of the historians, researchers, and institutions like Hampton Plantation, we are uncovering the truth layer by layer. This journey toward a more inclusive history feels like a personal calling to honor those who came before us. Families like the Ridgeleys and their descendants who have opened their history and shared their stories have become part of a shared mission. Their willingness to preserve and share their family's history strengthens and a collective journey, helping us understand the intricate and intertwined paths that have brought us to where we are today. Today, we are building a more complete narrative and one that ensures a future for generations and will remember, honor, and learn from our shared past. And in the end, for closing, I'm going to have Cheryl tell you exactly what the study was like, and you'll get a better understanding of what was done at the university.
To trace the lives of about 300 people who were given their freedom in the will of Governor Charles Carney Ridgely. That was the scope of the research we were asked to do, and we were asked to look in Towson, in Sandy Bottom, and in Lutherville. We very quickly realized, however, that if we stayed with that protocol, that we would miss the several hundred other people who had been held in slavery before 1829 and who were held in slavery after 1829, because the emancipation was not a general emancipation. It was a staggered or age-related emancipation that only freed about 100, between 70 and 100 people immediately between the ages of 25 and 45, and any child under 2 was able to leave with their parents. We began by tracing those lives, but in the course of understanding who people were and what they did, the research kept expanding, because as we asked more questions, well, who are these people? What were they doing? We found that we had to go back through the primary source record. I think anybody who does African American history has to return to the source, return to the account books, and start all over, because so many people have not interpreted them from a humanistic perspective, but more from an economic. You know, what's your value? What are you worth? Rather than who are you? What have you done? Who are you in the world? And so we've tried to do that. And in the course of going back to the account books and perhaps seeing someone like Millie Sheridan, who is the dairy maid down here at the dairy, we begin to see the pounds, the thousands of pounds of butter that are being made here. We're beginning to see the cream that's being produced here. We're beginning to see the kind of monetary effect that this labor is having. So when you come to Hampton, you are often given the impression that these very savvy people who've made great business moves have built this wealth. When you really begin to look at the people who are doing the work, when you go to the iron furnaces, when you look at the materials and implements and the cannon and the shot and all the ordnance that are being produced, let's say, for the American Revolution, you start to see the products of the labor, and these products are being sold and producing the wealth that we see manifested in the mansion. The mansion is built from the wealth from that iron furnace. It is the foundation for almost everything that we see. So when being able to go back through the inventories, to read the names, to see who was where, because until these lists existed, and I don't think people had actually put people in their places where they were. So we began, I'm a landscape specialist, so we began by looking at the land. We began by saying, well, who was where? So who was at the furnace? And we could take these names that we had, place them where we knew they were, begin to understand what their experiences would have been, begin to really be able to see, oh, well, if you worked in a furnace, even if I don't have your narrative, I know what has to happen in a furnace. If you're working in a quarry, because the stone that's built for I think the Washington Monument down in Baltimore, that comes from the Ridgely quarries. And so you have all of these various agricultural, which you're seeing here, industrial, which would have been
at the furnace and at the mills and at the quarries. We also had domestic slavery, which would have been inside of the house. And so these are all of the ways in which we've been able to trace the people that we are interested in and put them inside the labor that was defining at least their work life, if not their personal life. The other side of that is that we've been looking at these families and watching them intermarry and come together as a family. These are not a random group of people being held in slavery in Hampton. These are multiple generations of the same family. And I think that is a really important point.
What do you think about that? I think she summed it up pretty much. And I'd like to quickly acknowledge that some of the photos and the videos used in this presentation are sourced from other creators. And I'll show you some photos of some family members. And this was George. His name was George, named after his grandfather, George Batty.
Smell up on my I'm like, oh, yes, I'm blessed. Yes, I'm blessed. Thanking God, thanking God. Every day is feeling just like Sunday. Why you fly on the side? Green light, everything is moving my way. Like me, living dreams. Just like all around, I'm feeling like violence. What do you say? In place, single water got you acting like this. In a day go by, that I don't try to thank the Lord up above. And if you wonder why I'm loving life, I'm close and tell you what's up. Ask me on the way I'm blessed. Yes, even though I know. Yes, I'm blessed. Yes, I'm blessed. Yeah, I'm going to bless. Yes, even if no one knows. It's not on the face of my own. Yes, I'm blessed. Yes, I'm blessed. Yes, thank God.
And those are the sides of my family members that are direct descendants of the Baddies and the Beaties. They're called Beaties here, to let you know. And we have one other one in the room back here. They actually carries the last name. Shirley Beatty. Yes. So she actually carries the last name. But my great-great-great-grandfather was George Batty, and that's where we all descend from. So I thank you for coming and listening to my story. I appreciate it. Thank you. Is there any questions? Any questions? Yeah.
What was the last year that they had slaves at Hampton?
It was staggered, so it varied. Emancipation, 1865.
So 1865.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. So after that, Lincoln freed everybody. That's when that happened. Okay.
You have insight into the circumstances that led to the big manumission in 1829.
He died.
Well, he died, but he was motivated to set up the provisions for that, even though the land was going to his son,
Mhm.
and his son bought more slaves. So a manumission of that scale seems unusual.
It is, and that's part of the story. And they don't know his thinking. All they
That's
know,
why I was wondering
yeah.
if you had more context for what led to that.
We're still working on that as well, looking into it and looking at the paperwork to find out. Yeah, because when the original Charles Ridley passed away, he didn't have any children and he left it to his nephew. You have to remember that. So those weren't biologically his children either. So he may have had some sympathy, you know, to manumit them in his will, but he did, and thank God he did, or I wouldn't be here. You know.
How much success have you had in contacting Ridgely descendants who are alive today?
Actually, I'm on committees down there. It was interesting because I had asked the curator after one meeting we had, I said, well, are there any Ridgely's at the table? She said, yeah, the lady was sitting like two seats from you. He was never introduced. I had no idea. But I appreciate them, you know, giving up the record so we can find out who we are. But I never really officially met her and know that that's who she was. There are two that are on this committee that I'm on. I'm actually doing some consulting work with them as well as far as the descendant engagement to make sure to try to bring all the enslaved descendants together. So I'm helping them do that as well, because I've found a lot so far, and I've done that alone.
I just want to say that I really appreciate all your work
Thank
you've
you.
done on this. And, my family has Spencer in it. I'm from Baltimore originally. Very familiar and connected with Houston and that section of Houston that was the black, as is the black section, but people have been trying to encroach on it for
Many, many years.
And our family just recently, in the last, I would say, 5 years or whatever, started doing family reunions and that, and looking at the line, the family. And, so I'm interested in now doing some of the more in-depth work in terms of our family line, because I've just met family and like you're related to us, you know, all. And so we have a lot of questions that have been.
And with the Spencers, not everybody moved to Pennsylvania. Actually, there was a whole, like in Towson Town, a whole branch that just stayed right there in Baltimore County.
Yeah.
I think, my branch and maybe a couple of others were the only ones that actually left Maryland and came up to Pennsylvania, and some went up to Lancaster County and so on. But at that time, it was mainly the Baddies and the Beatties that came up to claim the Spencers.
Yeah.
And some of them stayed. I didn't even know those people. That was that many Baddie families in Baltimore. And some of them did DNA tests to confirm it for me. And they came up related to me. You never know.
Touch on it a little bit. What were they working to?
Terrible.
7 days, 16 hours.
Just like you said, sun up and sun down. It's a typical plantation. And then they changed their names to farms. And even Pennsylvania had what they called farms. They weren't plantations, but they were farms. But typical plantations, just like down south. And they can't, I hear people say all the time, well, the conditions couldn't be as bad as down south. Slavery is slavery by no other means. You can't say that. So, any other questions? Yes,
Those main emissions that you showed, where are the originals held?
they're held at Maryland University. But I'm sorry, they're at the state of Maryland right now.
With the state archive?
Yes,
Okay.
they're actually.
So they were county records or
Yeah.
state records or
They donated it to them.
the county records?
Mhm.
Yeah, Westminster.
And do you have any sense where the first slaves were coming from? Were they buying them from the south?
That's one of the questions I had actually proposed when I was talking earlier. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm trying to get there by working with the young lady at Goucher's at the archive, she's an archivist there, to see if we can find some record indicating where were they purchased from? You know, what ship did they come on?
I know, like in 1790, the greatest concentration of slaves cutting manufactured is in Maryland and Virginia, the Tidewater area. And then a lot of those were sold to the South, and South Carolina had as well. But that's where a lot of the ancestry comes from. Alan Taylor's roots from Jacinte, I guess there's a plaque down in Annapolis, that's supposed to be where he came in and was sold.
And the other side of my family is from the eastern shore of Maryland, where the ships came in there, and that's where they ended up living. And that's actually where the DeShields last name comes from. It comes from the eastern shore of Maryland, and it is a slave name. So,
I just want to just state, number one, it's very imperative that we as Black Americans know our history.
absolutely.
Growing up in my family really did not speak about it because there was a shame, which in essence then was transferred over into us as children, not wanting to be derived from slaves, because people dictate to you who you are.
Right.
As I come along and learn who I am, nobody can ever tell me who I am. No one's going to dictate to me who I am because I know who I am. And I am proud of the fact that I have ancestors of which I now stand on the shoulders of, and I will always remember them and call their name because there is no shame on our side. And I think all people need to come together and realize this United States of America was built on the backs of my people, but we did not reap the benefits of that I hear certain people make comments about blacks not raising their children or not doing this or that, but where did it come from? When you take families and you separate them, you can't do that and then expect that we're gonna be okay. But my faith is in God, and I know that we will come together and be a multiracial America.
Yes.
You can't change what you don't acknowledge.
Exactly. And when you're talking about, families being separated, that was even after Reconstruction and moving on into the 1900s, it was done deliberately by creating projects.
Yes,
And they put a woman in the project and say, your man cannot be there.
correct.
So where is he supposed to go? It was all deliberate, and that still goes on today. The redlining still goes on today. It's not talked about. And all those things that still go on today that are under the table, even though it's against the law, doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So we have to, in the future, really pay attention to what we do, what we say, and be for everyone, not just certain people. So we all have to live here together, and I'm not going anywhere. My family's been here since the 1700s, so I'm not going anywhere. And I'm trying to build on the knowledge I know right now. And when she talked about standing on the shoulders of her ancestors, I stand tall on top of mine. That's why I'm doing the work I'm doing right now. Because I was always in the background, afraid to even talk about what I was doing, because I've been doing genealogy for so long. And I decided to step out front and start telling my stories and telling our stories, because they're just as important as anybody else's story, because there's a lot people do not know. There's not a lot of bad that comes out, a lot of good that come out, a lot. And it wasn't before, civil rights and all those other things that we had, I wouldn't be able to stand and talking to you today. So we have to consider that as well. Any other questions?
It's possible that a lot of the slaves get Columbus were already here
Yes. Actually,
and native.
there were Africans here before Columbus came. They were on ships, and they also came with other shipmen. Columbus had an African with him. People went, there was another ship that went into Puerto Rico. He had an African prince on the boat with him. So yes, it's not in the books, but that is very true. They were here. They already had a relationship with the Indians, Native Americans, and that's why they brought some of them along, so that they could build those relationships with them as well. Pick up a book. It's in some of the books, some of the old books that we actually have, and people wrote things down to tell you the truth. Anybody else? No? Thank you.
Okay, our meeting is adjourned, but I'm sure that Neicy will be glad to talk to anybody individually who'd like to get it.
Hi.